Welcome, Louise. Welcome to Leadership Inside Out. It is a real pleasure to have you today. You have a varied and quite impressive background, but welcome.
Thank you, Guy. It's lovely to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Louise. We were just talking very briefly before, and I think it's very fair to say that assumptions, one should not make any assumptions with you or your background at all. So.
Yeah, I have to say I often catch myself never presume or assume anything. So that's a good rule to live by. Yeah, thanks, Guy. I run future-focused leadership consultancy, conscious, because that's the flavor of coach that I am, and which I started in May. Gosh, it'll be 20 years ago this coming May. So.
Wow.
I've just moved out of my teenage years, which is a bit of a worry. I'm going to have to grow up. And I specialize, as I said, in the future of work, future-focused leadership. And it's been an extraordinary journey because as my clients have shifted and the markets have shifted and changed, so have I. Mm-hmm. So over the years, I've studied all sorts of things. I'm a practitioner in futures and strategic foresight. I work with behavioral science. Recently, of course, probably around about the time of the pandemic or just before, started taking a deep dive into complexity theory and understanding complexity, because that's the world that we're dealing with.
Absolutely.
And then I was very fortunate. I belonged to a think tank, and I co-authored, along with 30 other amazing people, a book called Uncertainty, which we published a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago. And I sat on the editorial board, which it's kind of it's just a contributory type of scenario, and learned a little bit about publishing a book. And I thought at the same time, I need to do this for myself. There's been a book cooking for a very long time. So I got writing and published a book called Relevant, Future-Focused Leadership. And that's been amazing because I've been running masterclasses, multi-session masterclasses and keynotes and all sorts of things for quite a long time on various of the key topics, but I'd never brought it together in one offering. So I guess, that's just been incredible. And the work that's come out of that is very much focused on leaders and organizations who realize that our world of work has changed, and of course, everybody talks about it. We're so sick of hearing about change, transformation, endless sort of rhetoric around it. But the reality is that we need to shift our thinking, and it's very easy to say to people, you need to think differently, of course, but really tricky to do. And there are a series of lenses or ways of understanding the world that I've found over the years have really show a marked difference between leaders and executive teams who are able to think in that way and navigate our complex, uncertain world with more ease, and those that don't. And I'm really seeing, I made up a word recently, which I couldn't find the right word for something. So I settled on divergification, which may sound a little bizarre, but I think we're really starting to see a split between leaders, teams, organizations that have embarked on investing and ensuring that how they think as a collective capability is what they need for this world of work that we're in. And, if anybody warbles on about change anymore, I think we all want to throw ourselves on a stake and commit harikiri. But I think if anything's that really brought it to the fore is it's been AI, of course, over the last couple of years. And before that, pandemic, which I really think shifted the zeitgeist in an extraordinary way, in a way that we could never have engineered. So it's interesting times. I'm really excited about the work that I do, and to be sitting here and talking to you today.
Wonderful. No, and it's fascinating. I'm doing a lot of work with AI at the moment, and there's a statistic that's been bandied around that I find just enlightening in some ways. 97 million jobs may be lost through AI, but 170 million may be created. And essentially, we won't be replaced by AI, we'll be replaced by people who know how to use it. And that requires a significant shift in our way of thinking.
Yeah, and it's not as if it's out there, it's not as if it's on the horizon and we have a bit of time. It's already here. And that, I almost think of it as sort of a 1 degree separation. It starts off tiny, but within a very short period of time, we just have this massive gap. Hence my made up word of divergification, And, there are some organizations that really are doing everything in their power to ensure that it's not just the systems that we put in place, it's not just the transformation projects, which 70% traditionally fail, we know that. It's actually the fundamental thinking, the capability in the organization and the skills around it. And if people don't get their skates on, I really believe they're going to miss the boat. And we saw, I think there was an article about 6 months ago, maybe 4 or 5, yeah, I could be wrong on the timing, where the FT had interviewed the top CEOs for many different organizations across the sectors. And the majority had said, over 50% had said that if they don't radically transform their organizations, they won't exist in 10 years. And I really don't think I think that figure is very conservative. So yeah, we've been saying that, of course, but as a futurist, predictions are not in my, they're not in my, repertoire. However, the signals of change, it's not even signals of change. The reality is it's already occurred. And there's no time to waste, but we're not too late.
No, absolutely not. So Louise, how did you get to this point? 20 years running your own business, very impressive. That's in terms of running businesses, obviously that stands out as an outlier. How did you get to that point? Because again, you've got a very interesting background in terms of your career, in terms of your upbringing.
Yeah, I started working. I was really lucky. I was born in Cape Town to a couple of Brits. So I got to grow up somewhere different and very diverse and with extraordinary political pressures and social pressures. But I started my working life in London and I worked in the investment banking sector. I didn't know anything about it. I wasn't particularly wild about it, but it seemed to be the place as a young person to make some money. That was the driver at the time, make enough money to travel and see a bit of the world. And of course, the hours are pretty preventative around that, the reality of that. But from there, I moved into technology and from there into executive search. And what I found was that the roles that I landed up in were very much negotiation of big contracts and over longer periods of time for higher amounts, and then working with various virtual teams to pull those clients out, and of course endless relationship management and even just sort of getting the deal done would often mean 20 warring, the client's sort of 20 technical people and our 20 technical people and everybody warring and chest beating. And I think that it was just an amazing education of how to negotiate and get deals done and to understand people's drivers. And my interest in people really sort of started there, but it didn't get well honed until I worked in executive search. And of course, executive search a little different to recruitment in the way that the client, it's very competitive. Ultimately you win a deal and they pay you up front to go out and find the person they're looking for. Highly confidential. And I worked at the top end. So, various partners for consultancies and director level people. But the interesting thing at that time was that, of course, it was the rise of .com and the new economy. And my business partner at the time worked with First Tuesday to build that out. Yeah, a very long time ago. So that was just an amazing, I guess, dive into the world of investment or investing in startups. And I purely worked with mostly the VC community, various different private equity people and organizations that were investing in startups. And I learned an enormous amount. That was just extraordinary. And built out a great little team, and then read a book called, I've still got it in my book here somewhere, called The Fall of the New Economy. And one of the extraordinary things about executive search is you really feel the raw end of the market. So when people stop hiring, when there's no money in the market, literally business stops. And we started feeling that in the market. And I read this little book by a Newsweek economist, and I realized that, that was it. Our time was out. And I had a choice. Probably one of the most difficult decisions we've ever had to make in my business life was shut the business and pay redundancies or ride out our cash flow. And we made the right decision. It wasn't easy. There was a lot of conflict around it. It was heartbreaking. But fortunately, we called it right. And the markets crashed. And the rug got pulled out of all of that. And then I was in Dubai on holiday, and I got a sense of what, I guess the culture and the environment was like, the business environment was like. And I just thought, right, let's step out of the market and do this for a bit, because I think, yourself, being in a downturn in an economy that doesn't seem like it's going to turn around anytime soon, and sitting in the cold and dark and rain was just all too much. And I decided that I would do something different. And I was managing director, and I set up the operations for a British luxury lifestyle global company. And I was there for about 3.5 years, very interesting time. I was managing director for Middle East, North Africa, so got to travel quite a lot and begin to understand the region, which I really didn't before then. And I was there during 9/11, so all sorts of nuances. I'm really fascinated by cultures, how people think, what are the norms, what are the drivers, and that sort of deep listening you learn when you know nothing. You really have to go in almost as a sort of, not even a toddler, because they're just a bit tricky, but you really have the sense of, I need to absorb as much as I can and hold everything lightly until enough time has passed that I can actually really get a sense of the place and of people and, really what drives them. And then moved back to London. My time was up, moved back to London in 2005 and started the business I have today. And the big question in my mind was, what the hell am I going to do? What do I love to do? What am I passionate about? What does that look like? And I realized it was helping individual leaders and organizations to grow. And I think the beautiful thing about executive search is you get to really understand deeply how culture works, how leaders work, how teams work, how organizations thrive, the difference between those that do and don't. And, the sort of sense that you get in an organization about how they go about doing what they're doing and where that thinking is coming from. And it becomes chalk and cheese, those that do well and those that don't. And also honing my own sense of the types of organizations and people I wanted to work with, and those that kind of, just felt a little, meaningless to me. And that was really important. And it's been a journey ever since, as the markets have changed, as businesses have changed. I mean, we've been through all sorts of things in 20 years. Yes. And the need for what's needed in the market for leaders and organizations to thrive has shifted and changed. As we have. So it's really always been about a sense of, right, what's next? What are my clients and what's the market going to need next? And sometimes I'm too far ahead of the game and I need to pull it back. But it's proven itself to be probably that ability to sort of sense and tap in to that deep curiosity about what's going on in the world and hold things lightly has served me really well.
Wow. And if you look back over this 20 years, what are sort of some of the highlights, some of the sort of learning experiences that you've gone through, and what has that taught you moving forward?
Yeah, I think so. I think just be audaciously courageous.
Wow. Okay.
Just rings so true. The times that I just looked at a market and thought, I want to be doing that, and just went barreling in and kind of learnt en route, have served me really well. Because when I overthink things, or I think I need, another qualification or another, what have you, I mean, I very quickly realize what I need, how I need to back that up, and what I need to study, and where I need to go for knowledge and insight and some deep learning. But it's really having that sort of almost fearless, that's what I want to do, and that's what I want to learn about, and literally just chucking myself into it. And I've done that time and again. I mean, at some point I decided that I should lecture for business schools, and called up a bunch of deans and said, you should really, we need to meet, we need a coffee. So I think it's almost that, and maybe headhunting gave me that, maybe executive search gave me that. It's just, I'm calling to talk to another human being about something that I can see that absolutely would serve that organization or add value to what they're up to. So I think that little bit of fearlessness, that courage, and not thinking that I'm limited in any way. And then, of course, very quickly realizing I need to dig in and research and learn, and make sure that I'm absolutely spot on in terms of the academic background behind things. And then I think one of the big pivotal moments, so the first thing was I'd already been coaching for 5 years, and I thought, gosh, I need a qualification. This is ridiculous, I mean, I think I'm a decent coach, but I've got to go and get a qualification. And I searched the market because I didn't want a bog standard, middle of the road. It had to be ICF, which is a global standard. And it needed to be something that really stretched me. I think those are the things that get me excited in life, where I desperately need to stretch and grow. And I always feel it's a bit like a brain itch. I get to that point and there's something needed. And I happened upon conscious leadership coaching, which is an ICF qualification. And that was in about 2010, 2011. And that was just amazing. It tapped me into the whole conscious business market, or conscious capitalism. And I remember going to Boston in 2012 for the 4th annual Conscious Capitalist Conference, and people like, the sort of founders, the big thinkers around all of that. And I'm just thinking Whole Foods market, John Mackey, all of that lot were very present. They were all there. It was a new sort of shift and a movement in business. And it was absolutely brilliant. It tapped into the way I understand people and business and community and, context and culture, because context always rules. Context shifts, everything shifts.
Absolutely.
How it really worked fundamentally at its core, no matter what sort of lovely marketing labels we put on top of things. And yet it was too early. And it wasn't until post-pandemic that we started to see what was a nice to have becoming a vital, urgent must-have, and especially in the age of our AI-infused world of work. So that was critical. And then I think one of the big things was I took a Futures and Strategic Foresight course. And I can remember sitting for, 3 days or whatever it was, the initial course. I remember sitting there thinking, nobody told me there was an academic qualification, because you can do an MSc in Futures. No one told me there's an academic qualification for the way I think naturally. I was just dumbfounded. Wow. And I loved every second of it. It almost explained my preference for thinking in multiple futures, for connecting dots, for always tapping into what's going on in the world and being able to connect things and make sense of things in a way that I hadn't realized. There was some sort of formal qualification around it. And then the other big thing for me is behavioral science. So I'm a Lumina learning practitioner, and I think the most interesting thing is how these tools have moved on. Not for all systems, let's just put that into context. But there is a new breed of understanding the behavioral science side of things and neuroscience. I mean, enormous areas of study for me. And the beautiful thing about these areas is that almost every year we discover new things about how we work, how people actually work, And so it's not static, and I'm not great with static things. I need to keep learning and adding to things. So those were key. And then, of course, pivotal moments. I mean, starting a book that wrote me, literally, I started it in April. It wrote me till August. And then I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with this? How do I get it out there? So yeah, those have been the key moments. And in that time, I've traveled a lot. I've worked with very diverse clients. They probably have a similar way of thinking or a similar focus on shifting thinking to adapt. This adaptability thing seems to be the sort of common DNA. Yeah, and I pretty much love most of what I do except the admin.
Wonderful. And I mean, what a journey. And looking forward, what do you see ahead of you?
Yeah, I feel this enormous sense of urgency, Guy. I don't know if you feel it as well.
I do.
There is so much that we need to wrap our heads around in terms of content. It's so noisy. And yet, it's actually not that tricky. It's just a simple shift in how the lenses that we view the world through. And fortunately, unfortunately for a lot of us, we were kind of schooled in right or wrong, up or down, left or right, very sort of, I guess, the origins of machine metaphor kind of learning. And for people my age, I think there's a lot of unlearning to do, and allowing that sort of shift in thinking to come through and actually foster itself in our organizations. It's so needed. So I feel a huge drive and a huge urgency around working with clients to help them to, everybody's got this stuff, but how do we ignite it in organizations and take away some of the stuff that just naturally kills it? So yeah, I think that mission is strong, and I cannot imagine it sort of filtering away over the foreseeable. I find it hard to think in decades now. It's it's 1, 3, 5 years is about the max. And how can I help people to navigate this time with more ease and make better decisions? Because ultimately that's what it's all about. A lot of us are making decisions into the abyss, and yet we have the power of AI to help us to build out scenarios and start thinking more holistically in terms of multiple potential futures. Yeah. I think if any of us, I think we should have all learned by now that certainty is, an illusion, and actually complexity is quite beautiful. If we learn to dance more lightly Absolutely. With it. Yeah.
No, it's interesting. I feel that same energy. This is a wonderful time to be alive. It's a wonderful time for someone like you and I with a little bit of experience to build, the future from. And there's such an opportunity to grab hold of and use AI, but also more of an eclectic approach to management and businesses, organizations. Old
yeah, I mean, sorry to interrupt you, but I mean, one would argue, is it eclectic, or is it just more aligned with who we are and how we naturally think?
And maybe that's a better way of putting it. Maybe it is taking away those artificial barriers that we've put in place to actually embrace who we are as human beings.
Yeah, and also to begin to embrace, and I love that word, the nature of where this is going, because it can be tricky when we first start out trying to shift our thinking around what's actually going on versus what was. I mean, the worst thing about, I mentioned before, I'm not in the business of predictions, simply because they're based on data, and data is the past. And the best we can hope for is today, in terms of an understanding. And what's to come is being created as we go forward. And I think the key thing here is for all of us to understand, and it takes a shift, that we have way more agency than we might realize. And we are all actively creating the future that we will need to live in, with its consequences, unintended consequences, at some point in time. And that's an interesting way of looking at life, and I think one that serves people well.
Yes, and I mean, I've been involved in change for, well, most of my career as well, and that concept that many people hold back or they fear change, that is becoming less of an option for people now. We need to embrace, and I work a lot with young people, and that's one of the sort of driving themes of young people, is that change is constant, and you need to always be thoughtful of the future and what that means in terms of what you're doing now.
Yeah, I've written quite a lot about the actual the difference between change, transition, and transformation, which is just an outcome. But Guy, I want to ask you, if you were in that sector for so long, why is it that we still have most change and transformation projects fail to the degree of 70%? Well reported.
Yeah, and it's interesting you use the 70%. It's a number I come across quite a lot.
Is it true?
Well, I'm always a little skeptical, if I'm honest. I mean, change projects fail a lot. Don't get me wrong. Change, projects change. I mean, objectives change over the life of a project. But in my experience, there's a lack of clarity about what the outcome looks like. Now, culture and so forth, it's not always easy, but there's a lot of unrealistic expectations about what a project actually has to achieve or is going to achieve. Communication is generally, in my experience, one of the biggest faults. Half of my time, if I was running a change project, would be spent on communication. And even then, you can still miss it or not get it right. So, my big things are always about clarity of objectives, clarity of outcome, clarity of communication, always working with stakeholders, and see it as a journey, not a final resting place. It's you start a journey. You don't aim to achieve and stop at a place.
So all people related.
Absolutely all people related. And I've been lucky enough to do a lot of change around systems and processes and all that sort of stuff. But actually, at the end of the day, it's people, absolutely people. And take people with you. Take clear communication, clear understanding, and embrace that things will happen, and you'll learn stuff that will modify your outcomes as you go along. And it's an ongoing journey. It's not you don't suddenly arrive one day and think, this is great. I don't have to do anything for a couple of years now.
Yeah, it's that messy middle that gets everybody every time, that liminal space, the
absolutely
transition. Yeah.
And I'm a great believer of that sort of change versus transition. I think you're absolutely right. Change is the easy bit. It's the transition that is the messy, horrible bit that messes with people's minds. And you make that shift. Change is the bit that happens quickly. Transition is the bit that takes time, and actually means working with people to help them adapt and adjust to that.
Yeah, I think I remember tuning into this and really honing into this when I was talking to a managing partner of a consultancy in the UK, and he's, we were talking about this change, which is factual. It has happened, will happen. It's a factual thing. It's not at the liminal space in between the transition, the messy middle, and actually, we often think of it as not great, but it's also pregnant with opportunity. I mean, there's everything good. I mean, the possibility emerges out of that space.
Absolutely.
And then transformation is just the byproduct. It's the outcome. It's, transformation is the result of a profound change of some sort that actually, I mean, we cannot not be changed. No. We cannot not be transformed, I should say. And then I remember asking him, and I said to him, why is everybody very comfortable citing 70% failure rate? And he said to me, well, it's true. And I'm like, okay. And of course, I asked him why. And he said, well, it's culture, And I said, what do you mean by culture? And he said, people, the architecture, the change architecture, the transformation architecture is perfectly designed. It's people. And I just said to him, isn't that a bit of a dichotomy there? And I think often that, people naturally resist change if they're not in the driving seat.
Exactly.
It's the natural way. And then, of course, organize in the middle. And, that resistance can be very real or not. Yeah. But it sounds like, your focus on people obviously would have a very different outcome.
And I think you're absolutely right. It's, you talked about people not wanting to change if they don't feel like they're in control. And, I'm no different. I've probably 24 change projects across my career of size. And I love it. I'm in charge. I'm the one who's driving it. I'm working with the client, I'm helping them agree, and so that bit is easy, but it's the people, when I've been subject to change, when I've had other people do it, early in my career, to me, different mindset. And for me, one of those sort of key moments is that communication, helping people feel like they've got some control over the process, even at a very similar level, simple level.
Sorry, so we've got a bit of a lag. So what won't change? Yeah, that's probably a good place to start. The other thing, have you ever run pre-mortems?
Yes.
On your projects? Yes. And what were the outcomes? Did you find that they were enormously helpful?
Always. Again, it's, getting people involved with the process, having them understand the drivers, what they want to see as an outcome, recognizing that, there's a sort of a collective, management, executive, goals as well. But yes, getting people engaged up front. Some of the best projects, most successful projects I've ever worked with have involved literally taking people from throughout an organization and getting them to design the change program. Here's the goals. Now help us change, help us design what we need to actually bring about these goals.
Yeah, and then the pre-mortem working back. I mean, it was so funny. I worked with a client once, and I said to her, have you worked with pre-mortems before? And she said to me, she sort of looked at me blankly, and I said, do you know what a pre-mortem is? And she said, well, it's the thing you do before you die. Yeah, and you can probably apply that to projects, change and transformation projects as well. So yeah, really made it fun.
Yeah, no, and it's not something that's done very often. Not something that's done, and it makes a difference if people feel either that they have been involved or that they know people that have been involved that aren't sitting at the top of the tree, that actually are, facing the consequences of what's, of the change or the transformation that comes as a result.
Enormous, yeah. And also I think if people sort of start at an endpoint, assume that this project has failed and work their way back, they can see where their input, their role has had an impact on something, for the sake of a pre-mortem failing. And it changes the sense of responsibility and ownership, as you say, that agency over actually directing that future and making a success out of it. So there's some smart stuff out there that's always,
It is, and I think, I've made a career, 10 years out of, running big change programs, and it's sad in a way because you need to bring the concept of having to bring in experts, that, organizations don't have that inherent expertise within their own ranks, but on the other hand, it brings in new thinking and different ways of looking at the world. So it's a balance.
Yeah, and I think if anything, we are in for an extraordinary time of change and transformation. I mean, I'll give it the label of change and transformation projects, but of course we know that the process isn't easily bundled together.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And AI is just, it's just another, mechanism. The pandemic has changed the way that, people view the world of work. We won't spend any time on that one because that's a whole new different conversation.
But that one to death. Yeah.
But again, AI. I mean, I was talking to my son. He's 22, and I was saying, well, look, what do you know about AI? He said, well, Dad, I'm not a coder. It's like, no, I don't think you understand. This is not a technical knowledge. This is you embracing and understanding the impact that it's going to have on your life and your work, any career you want. And we need to encourage, everyone to recognize that. And it's just, it's going to be changing. Another 2-5 years time, there'll be something else coming through.
Yeah, and I mean, I've sort of been digging into this quite a lot. I think that young people naturally think in scenarios. I mean, anybody who's been gaming or any of these things. I mean, I was watching my nephews the other day, and I mean, it's extraordinary the worlds that they're building and what they have to think about in order to make a success of things. There's banking, and they obviously have to pay rent and taxes and grow things. And I was just thinking how incredible that these young people, actually there's some upsides to all of this.
Yeah.
Is that they already think in futures terms, they already think in scenarios, they already think in possibilities, and if not this, then that, what else do I do? And I think sometimes when we ask somebody who is of the age where they've kind of grown up on a screen, or at least part of it on a screen, it's kind of almost like a crazy question, because they already have, that sort of innate ability to pick something up and run with it. Is probably built in simply through their experience of, study and school and using tablets and phones and computers in a way that perhaps, we have to work. I mean, I'm saying the royal we, but I won't sort of capture you in that sort of era, but certainly that others might have to work at, because we haven't developed the neural pathways that make it easy.
No, I completely agree.
Yeah, wow.
Thank you. A couple of final questions, if I may. So, looking back, what advice would you give your younger self, the one that has just come from South Africa, just about to start the world of work?
I can remember my first job. I was given the task of reading the FT cover to cover for 3 months, the probation period. And I can remember sitting on the tube, the sort of walk, and then the bus, and then the tube, and then the walk, and the rain, and everything else. And I remember sitting there reading this FT cover to cover, thinking, this is gobbledygook. I have no idea, what any of this actually means, apart from the general concept of markets and investments and things like that. So I think that never, take more risks.
Right.
It doesn't matter if it's wrong, because you'll adjust. It's human nature. We figure it out. This bit I love, that bit I don't. Never stop taking that risk. If you have a sense that something's worth looking at, go and have a good look. Don't sit on the sidelines like an accidental tourist, complaining or, just dishing up commentary. Go and have a look. But do it with a light touch, always, because there'll be parts of it you want to keep and parts that actually don't sit well. And I think life is just this sort of extraordinary collection of, that interests me, go after it, keep the stuff that, seems to resonate really easily, and let go of the other stuff, and move on, keep moving on. There was a fantastic book called Range. I don't know if you read it. It's a bestseller, and not many, well, pre-pandemic. I've lost pandemic years. I don't know where they went. I think it was David Epstein. I don't want to get the author's name wrong, but a brilliant book about how this is really the age of generalists. So yes, we need that deep expertise. We still need something, you know, and focus on something that you're passionate about, because it's hard to sustain if it, you know, if you're not. But then, you know, we need that range. We need that broader understanding of how things work. So just follow what piques your interest. Go and have a look, bank it, you know, and keep updating, and then keep going. So I think that if I think of all the things that have worked out well for me, it's because I had that courage to just give it a shot and go and have a look. And I found something magical there and was able to hone it and develop it and keep it and, you know, then find what's next.
Thank you. Any last words? Where can we find your new book? Is that available on Amazon?
Yeah, it's on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and, you know, all the online booksellers. It's in paperback and, of course, the usual digital. And otherwise, my website is a great place to go. It's mowbraybydesign.com. LinkedIn, I'm quite active. It's probably the one platform I'm reasonably active on. Mm-hmm. So, and I publish articles on Substack, and that's louisemowbray.substack.com quite regularly, probably no more than about once a month, so not too much, but there are things that need deeper thought and exploration that I like to dig into, and that's quite a healthy community, so come and join me there.
And I mean, I've joined Substack a couple of months ago. It certainly gives you an opportunity to a much wider audience as well. Some fascinating posts that you can actually access through that media site.
Yeah, it's a great platform, and I think we started off just with Medium, and of course this, Substack I really enjoy, and it's just an easy way of. And mine is free, so I'm not trying to get anyone to sign up. But more importantly, I think probably for the key work that I'm deeply passionate about, and if something about this, you know, with your listeners resonates, the multi-session masterclasses I'm delivering for leadership teams. That's on my website under masterclasses, and of course keynotes, because we've got to ignite people's imagination before, you know, going in and actually doing the work. So I'd be keen to hear from them if that's the case.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, I mean, Louise, it has been a real pleasure. As I always find that when I start these conversations, I'm never ever quite sure where they're going to go. But debating change and transformation and transition certainly wasn't in my highlight, but it's just a wonderful opportunity to speak to a fellow professional who understands and has a very similar appreciation for that whole environment. So thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure spending time with you.
Yeah, thank you, Guy. And thank you for answering my questions on the change side. I'm always fascinated to talk to people who've actually got on the ground in-depth experience around something. So yeah, it's wonderful to get your perspective as well.
Thank you, Louise.